So the two note statement has surface meaning. There's also a sort of deeper element to it, and I think that it's a crucial lesson for all of us, and something that even I have to remind myself of often. Um, Before we start, I would also like to mention that you don't even need two notes, right? I've talked many times about the BB King. One note, he'll just be playing, and you can just play one note and make it feel good. And so the two note statement is like, twice as many notes to play with. BB can do it with one. Just imagine what you can do with two. Now, the deeper idea here is that this sounding good and having compelling guitar playing is not about learning stuff. Learning stuff is fun. Learning stuff gets us into new areas of interest. It supplies us with new sounds, but all of those things don't mean much if we don't have something to say. And again, the twist here is you can say it with one note, or you can really say it with two. And if you focus your attention on making two note statements, the first thing you might notice is that your mind starts to wander to "I need more notes," and that is an illusion. That is like, what do you call that when you're in the desert? A mirage, right? The mirage of more notes. Oh look, more notes over there. Oh, there's more notes over there, and you get there and there's nothing there. This idea of more notes leading to feeling better about your playing, it just does not work. And this is coming from somebody who tried for years at a time to make that work. Again, it's cool to learn lots of notes, it's cool to play fast, it's cool to do all of these things, but none of it makes you feel any better than it will if you can do it in two notes. So the concept is sound right there. You could just play any two notes on the guitar and you can make them feel good. But I'm going to give you something that is super concrete that you can use that will also make sure that you're satisfied that you're playing the right notes on the right chords. And then we'll talk about doing chord changes, and we'll explore some little two note statements that I think you'll enjoy. So, the first thing we're going to do, as always, is look at a chord. And we will associate that chord with a shape. And then we will address this two note statement as it applies to each chord. So, the first chord we'll try today, we'll keep it real simple, is A minor bar chord, 5th fret, Old Faithful. So it's just your basic bog standard A minor bar chord. Now, the scale that goes with this, and again use a visual only approach, no abstracting, no thinking about note names and all these different things. Again, these things are important within their own sphere of understanding music theory, of learning the fretboard, but knowing those things intimately does not a better player make. What makes you a better player is playing. And so let's just maybe talk about the abstract idea first, actually, before we get in. A minor, and the notes in an A minor chord are A, C and E, and that's the root, the flat third and the fifth. And so I have to find out which one is which and prioritise playing one over another. And all these exercises are fruitful, they do lead you someplace, and so on. But what I'm suggesting is that if the chord's A minor and you already know how to play an A minor chord, it's already got all the good notes. So you don't need to think about it, you can see them. What are the good notes? Well, I would encourage you to try this approach. To make sure that your hand isn't just playing a fingering on autopilot, I'd like you to map out the notes of that chord using only the index finger. So you've got the 5th fret, On the low E string, then it goes 7, 7, and then on the G, B, and E strings, it goes 5, 5, 5. So it goes 5, 7, 7, 5, 5, 5. They are the notes that you can visualise. Them that it was on my Pentatonic Mastery workshop will have heard me talking about overlays. So what I'd like you to do now is play the A minor pentatonic pattern 1, Old Faithful. And now we will think of both of those things simultaneously, the scale and the chord. I call these overlays. So without touching your guitar, I want everybody just to think about the chord on the guitar, and then think about the scale, the chord, the scale, the chord, the scale. If you just look at your fretboard, you have a sort of visualization capacity that can address and think of those two things simultaneously. And that right there is the meta skill that will allow you to improvise and hit the right notes. So we've did the bit where we hit the right notes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to practice two note statements. What that means is we will use a note that's not in the chord as our start point, and then we'll land on a note that's in the chord. Now this will have us playing the exact same scale but with a twist. So on the high E string, and I always encourage you guys to do this descending, because the amount of times we start ascending, and it just so happens to be that if you're going to start a solo, it's probably going to jump out and cut through a lot better if you start high rather than if you start on the low E string. So practice these scales descending at least as much as you do ascending. So the first two note statement on the high E string goes like this. It's a note that's in the scale but not in the chord of A minor, and I'm moving to a note that is in the chord. So you have to be able to visualise that. You have to know, okay, that's in that chord shape. I'm not forming a chord, but I can see that it's in that. Now on the B string, it will be the same phrase. Same exact phrase. On the G string, the same exact phrase. But on the D string, the target note, the note that's in the chord, is actually on the 7th fret. So the way to make the two note statement on this string is ascending. You go, because you're always moving from a note that's not in the chord to a note that is in the chord. And again, not by means of abstraction, but visually based on an overlay of the very chord that you're thinking about. You can see the chord, you can see the scale, you can choose. On the A string, it's an ascend as well, 5 to 7. And on the low E string, it would be a descent to the root note of the chord. So now we've got a scale, but we're playing it and not all of the strings are moving in the same direction. Now all I want you to notice first is that that sounds more musical than just playing the scale. So it's descend, 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 ascend, ascend, descend. So the ascends are on the 4th string, 5 to 7. On the 5th string, 5 to 7. Yeah, there's a great phrase. D string, 5, 7. A string, 5, 7. Low E string, 8, 5. That's a better musical phrase than, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, it's just straight up and down the scale. That. So, playing the scale and finding out where the target notes are. Now let's dig deep on the high E string. Let's use the concept of recycling again. For anybody who hasn't heard me talk about recycling before, it's taking any simple idea and getting as many different permutations or variations from it as possible. And of course, if we're dealing with two notes, then we are not talking about note choice. So that quite often for people tends to be the primary source of focus. Where are the next notes? There are no next notes. So you have to make your full claim for the role of guitar player based on just how you can use two notes. And you might, to begin with, feel like you don't have much to offer. That the common phrase is, "I'm just not very creative." That's usually what comes up quite quickly for most people. And I want to here's a little interesting twist on creativity. Let's imagine for this exercise that creativity is the willingness to sit there whilst nothing's happening and keep trying stuff, even if you don't feel good about it. Creativity is fishing. You sit, you put the line in the water and you wait. You just wait, and eventually you'll catch something. And it might not always be what you were looking for, but you might start to get to know the waters a bit better, right? And so, in this example here, two notes. How many different ways can we play two notes? The answer is an infinite amount of different ways. Here are a few. I could choose to make this a long note. You could just combination. And you could just keep going. I used the space up quite a lot there. It's only two notes, but so I'm not thinking what are the other notes. I'm not allowed to play any other notes. Limitation is the key here. I'm only allowed to play these two notes. So what do I use? I use different rhythms. I use different articulations, slides. I might use bends. I might use vibrato. I might use notes that are legato. Legato meaning that one note runs into the next. No gap. Staccato. Sounds good to me. Like, think in terms of scoring a movie, right? Right, and if you're not sure, next time you watch a movie, just notice how simple sounds can really evoke a lot of emotion. And so play with curiosity and play simple things that inspire. And then the next thing to play will become apparent. And that next thing could be lots of notes, but it should come out of a vibe, an atmosphere, a mood. Check this out. If I go, like, what's going to happen next? Like, something's building there. Building into what? Who knows? It could be going to another string. There could be some chords underneath. But, like, you must have a sense of play. I'm doing something and it feels good. I'm not doing something and thinking this is only level 1, 2, 3, or maybe by this time next year I'll be doing something more interesting. Like, and another good idea. Instead of looking for interesting things to play, just get interested in what it is that you're already playing, and you'll start to notice that what you're already playing tends to sound more interesting. It's a sort of conundrum. But to the degree that you're able to say, these are the only notes, this is why limitation's so cool, these are the only notes I'm going to play. Leave a gap. that's cool. That makes me feel like I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just getting a sense of a wider picture. You know, I don't know what to do with it any better than you guys, but I'm in the zone. Now something's happening, and if I just keep pursuing it, it will reveal itself. That would be the essence of improvisation, I guess, as well, is that you don't know what's going to happen next. So instead of trying to control it, just play what you're playing and feel it. And when something else wants to come along, it will. Which is a good point to throw in, always sing what you play. Because by singing what you play and by guessing the next note in situations like this, you'll start to have little inklings or little forebearings of things that you could play. You'll hear the next note. You know, you might not hear it in real time, but you'll go, ah, I want to hear, and then you'll find that the more you've been practicing singing what you play, the more instantaneous that will take place. And eventually it'll get to a point where it's happening in real time. That's when we say that the hands, the eyes and the ears are connected. So, that was just 2 notes on 1 string. Let's now move to the 2nd string, and we've got another 2-note phrase. I won't bore you with all the different permutations that we can do, but now we have 2 different 2-note statements. We basically have call and response, begging to happen. The most simple form of call and response could be, and then you go, you know, so I didn't do it exactly the same each time, but the limitation was that say something on the high E string, respond on the B string. You want to flip it and do it the other way around, that's great, that's another creative move. You know? Now, at this point, with 4 notes, we have lots of different options as to how we choose to move around them. And again, thinking in terms of 2-note statements, here's a 2-note statement that rears its head here. What if I play the notes that are on the 8th fret on both the high E and B? Same finger. Then I can do it on the 1st finger. So what if I have... So that was the 8 rolling over to 8, 5 rolling to 5, then pulling off or even picking on the high E. There's so many different ideas that are begging to happen. Here are some other 2-note statements, right? Just think in terms of like, it's like geometry, what different kinds of shapes can you make? So let's try the B string at the 5th fret. Moving to the high E at the 8th fret. And if you think of that being like a diagonal move, you could also do this diagonal move from 8 on the B string to the high E string. So that's just 4 notes. Now, when you start to add other strings in here, 6 notes, you've got a whole other bunch of possibilities. But you're not thinking just run up and down the scale. You're hopefully thinking of make 2-note statements, little moves that are just 2 notes long. What other ways can you move? You can move, again, across strings at similar or the same fret. For instance, if I'm on the B string, 8th fret, then I can't move to the G string at the 8th fret. I would move to the G string at the 7th fret. That would fit the scale, right? So B string 8th fret, G string 7th fret, and then the B string 5th fret, G string 5th fret. So that's for 1 chord, right? 1 chord, we can pick different places to land, and they're based on a shape, the same chord that you're thinking of playing over, a shape on the fretboard, and for every shape a scale pattern. And before we move on and look at traversing 2 chords. If anybody has any thoughts, questions, assessments, whatever, now would be a good chance in the chat. Is there anything about this approach that's unclear? I have a single chord, I have a pattern that goes with it, I'm visualising both of them. The chord, in a sense, is the points of interest within that scale, and the pentatonic scale is a 2-note per string scale, so each string is an opportunity to start outside of the chord and end inside of the chord, and that's going to make our playing sound very in, which is to say very melodic, which is to say very connected to the underlying chords, which is important when we start to change chords. But before we do that, does anybody have a question? They can pose it to the chat, or you can jump on and ask. I'm easy, whatever it is that works best. And if not, then I shall jump straight in. Okay, so now we need a chord change. Let's have a look at, we'll start with D minor. We've did this move many times, sort of minor blues, but you know, it's a common move, but it needs to be in your repertoire. Happens so often in music. We'll move from A minor, we'll move to D minor. So let's explore D minor. D minor is a 5th string root bar chord. Looks like an A minor shape in the open position, and that would be D minor. Now, let's do the finger painting, which is just take your index finger and point to all of the notes in the chord, because it takes your attention from fingers to fretboard, from fingers to the shape, which ultimately becomes a series of notes to target, right? Now, the scale pattern that goes with that chord is pentatonic pattern 4. And we will use the root to root method to play that. That means that we're not starting the low E string because it doesn't contain the root note. We will start on the D note, that's the 5th string, the 5th fret, and that will be our pattern 4 start point. It's going to go like this. And then I'll catch the low E string and come back to the root note, the root to root note method. And this is again pattern 4. And actually, if there is anybody who's not sure of what pattern 4 is, then we shall have a little look-sees. So there's pattern 4 there, and notice how the chord, you can see it in there, it's got 2 of these. Pattern 1 has 2 pinky jobs, I like to call them, first finger to pinky, on the high E and B. Pattern 4 has them in the low E and A. It almost has a straight line like pattern 1, but it has this little indent here. It's these little peculiarities or idiosyncrasies that make the shapes easy to remember. So that's pattern 4. Now again, using the 2-note statement idea, I have to take a note that's not in the chord to a note that is in the chord. Well, guess what? That same exact phrase works. Right, to move from A minor, I went on that same string. I can also go, because that note is the note that's part of A minor, it's also part of D minor. It's also in pattern 1, as well as pattern 4. So this would be a case of what we call common tones, notes that feature in both scales or both chords. If anybody wants to get a nice on guitar way of hearing what the changing chords sound like, how they affect this melody, why the same melody sounds good on both chords, you can always use, and this only works for some progressions, but the A string open. My A string's open and I'm doing my... Now I can hear that lick in the context of A minor. Now shift to having the D string open, and you'll notice that the same lick doesn't hold the same gravity or have the same effect. So super simple. Groove is everything there, and that's the only reason why it sounds cool, you could say. It doesn't sound cool because I'm playing fancy notes. It just sounds cool because there's a groove. Hopefully it sounds cool, anyway. And this is the thing, even if it doesn't sound cool, it feels good to me, and that's the main thing. And that's what you guys want as well. You want your play to feel good, and like, not be full of opportunities to try and do different, you know, I need to do something different. That's practice stuff. Practice is full of woulda, coulda, shoulda, as we say, you know, different notes that we should learn, chords, things that we wish we'd kept up, like, that's practice. But play, what did you bring with you, do you know, that you can, you know, play your guitar the same way you would play a game of pool. If you're, you know, a snooker or billiards, or whatever the terminology is suitable, like, you know, if you're anything like me, after you've had 2 pints, you think you're a pool wizard, and quite often it's not the case, but that's always the attitude, and you always think you're going to pot a ball, and you just have fun. Some you win, some you lose, and but you don't go into it hopefully being super serious and like think you play that way. Just play it, groove with it, have fun, see what happens. Okay, so that works. That lick, that same lick works for both chords. Now let's turn our attention to the B string, and let's see what's what. So on the B string, the 2-note statement for A minor goes like this, as discussed, because that goes from a note that's in the scale to a note that's in the chord. However, when it's time to play D minor, this note at the 5th fret of the B string is not in the chord. Let's revert our attention back to the diagram, right? So there's pattern 1. Ba-dum. But when I shift to pattern 4, the lick now goes ba-dum. Now it's 1 note of a difference. Why? Because that's in the D minor chord and that's in the A minor chord. And this activity is about saying something indicative of the chord without breaking the bank. Or let's try it that way at A. D. The top string. On the G string, let's just run through this now. G string for the A minor chord going down, but for the D minor chord going up. Why? Because that note there is on the 7th fret of the G string is part of the D minor chord. We're only interested in travelling from a note that's not in the chord to a note that is in the chord. No more thinking required. G string for an A minor chord, descending 7/5. That's our 2-note statement. A note that's in the scale but not in the chord. A note that's in the chord and the scale. D minor, the note that's in the chord is on the 7th fret, the note that's in the scale is at the 5th, you go. So here's a little idea for A. And then on D, simple stuff. And then combine all the things, pull off B string. On the D D string. In the A minor pentatonic scale it goes up. Why does it go up? Because the 7th fret's part of the chord. Not as an abstract idea, but as a visualisation of a chord shape, a bar chord that you already know. And on the D minor chord, it's the exact same, because that note is what we call a common tone. It's common to both chords. So again, if I have the A, it works on both chords. It's super simple, it's super effective, and it's something you can all do today. 5th string, pull off for the A minor. Actually, we're hammering on from 5 to 7. And on the D minor chord, it's the 8th fret going down to the 5th. So. And on the low E string, for the A minor, it's just. And for the D minor, there are no notes on the low E string, which brings me to a cheeky 3-note idea, which is if there are no notes on the string you're on which are in the chord, which is true for D minor, on the low E string, the A note is not, although you could argue that it's part of the chord, we don't see it in this shape. That's all we're thinking about here. So we're going to go, and that ends up being a very classic little riff, a very Motown thing. You know, if you're going to do D minor, so that's us for A minor to D minor. Let's throw one more chord in the mix. We're going to go A minor to C. So what do we have to do? Right, now I'm going to suggest that we switch our attention for this C chord to pattern 5. This chord, pattern 5, runs through it, right? And I'm practicing the root to root method. I'm not playing all 6 strings in the scale that gets us stuck in one sound, one scale fits all. We will start on the 3rd fret of the A string, and we're playing pattern 5 from there. All the way back. Catch the notes you missed. Just sticking to this. Starting and ending on that C note. 2-note statements. Let's have a look. On the high E string, we will do a descend. 5 to 3. Why? Because that note G is in the chord. On the B string, we will do an ascend. Why? Because if that's my C chord, I'm only playing notes that are not in the chord from the scale and moving to a note that is in the chord. Maybe I'll just back it up a little bit again, like here's my C chord, here's my pattern 5. On each string, one of those notes is in the chord and one of them isn't. Which one is it? Figure it out. This string ascends, this string ascends, this string ascends, this string descends, this string doesn't have the note, so, which ends up being a little popular bass line as well. So we've now got a 3-chord chord progression. And I'm going to go. C, A minor, D minor, C, Now, the more you do this, the more you and sing what you play, you just start to kind of hear it. Like, you should know how these things sound, and it's more of an activity than it is memorisation, or it's just singing what you play. I think this would be a good point to go back over what the technique should be. We'll just apply it to the three shapes that we looked at. Like, how do you internalise these things? How do you get to the point where you can hear melodies and they just come out your guitar? The way is not via the SpaceX rocket science manoeuvre. It's a very practical way that it's done, and we'll just cover it again. So I guess before we do that, another point here that maybe you have questions. We looked at 2-note statements on one chord. We're talking about 2 and 3 chords. We're just using 2 notes on a chord, 2 notes in the next chord. You know, yes, there are potential limitations to how varied that can sound if you have all of those 2-note statements. Did it, did it, did it. But we've already kind of talked about how we can have variety. So, any questions? 2-note statements on one chord, 2-note statements on 10 chords. What we got? And if we don't got nothings, then I will jump in with the ear training stuff. Let me know. I failed miserably there to play the countdown theme tune, but I guess it's time for the ear training stuff. So, pattern 1, that was our first scale of the day, and if we start on the first note, we should know what the second note sounds like before we play it. Ba, ba. Now, this won't take you long if you just sit with it. These notes are not going anywhere. The pentatonic scale has had the same formula since T-Rex was a pup, as I like to say, and because it's unchanging, you know, once you get the sound in your ears, you can't unhear what you have now heard. So it's ba da ba, ba da 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 da, ba da 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 ba, da da like, you know, the more you work with this, you'll start to be able to create longer phrases. As sometimes you make mistakes, we're only human. It's worth mentioning here that it's also a good idea to just do this chromatically. Try and pitch to the best of your ability. I know that some of you might be thinking, well, you know, my wife or husband or partner, significant other, children, the cat, somebody, the neighbour next door, somebody will hear me doing this, and then, you know, that will be embarrassing or something like that. So we kind of put this to one side. I see a couple of people smiling here, right? This is a familiar story, right? And the truth is, you know, they won't be laughing when they hear how well you play when you work in this stuff, because, you know, and you can do it quietly, you can sort of hum it, you know, it can be almost be inaudible. That won't necessarily work for you guys here, but I'll try. Like, like, you almost notice there my posture, like I'm not really looking at the fretboard, I'm sort of, it's almost like I'm listening, and like I'm just trying to connect to what I'm playing. And you know, you will be rewarded for your boldness and perseverance in these endeavours. Like if you're really trying to get the sound of the guitar in you, and you into the sound of the guitar, like stuff's going to start to happen. You know, and I'm sure it has already for you guys, but it will get deeper. And that's a guarantee. So, you know, again, guess the next note. Da-da, 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 da-da. And you'll get to a point you're looking at the fretboard and you're like, you'll just know how to find it. Let's do it for the D minor pentatonic scale. Start on the root note. People's ears are confused because these 5 patterns don't all start on the root note. We're starting on random notes and not hearing the consistent patterns within. So start on the D note, 5th fret, A string. Same idea. The more you play, chromatic. I never ever thought I would get good at this stuff, ever. Like, maybe some of you have shared this with you before. Like, I remember the first time it happened. I was probably 15 years old, 16 years old maybe, sitting in the bedroom at, you know, my mum's house, and I remember playing this note and sliding to this note, and for the first time, because I'd been practicing the very exercise I'm showing you, I went, and I knew that was how that note would sound. It was a light bulb moment, as they say. That didn't mean the whole fretboard opened up like that, but I knew then and there that there was something else for me. There was a deeper connection. I wasn't just moving my fingers about and hoping that the visual patterns and the lessons had stuck. Now I can hear something, and now I'm developing my sense of melody. And you keep working it, you keep working it. Just responding to Michael, Andy, before I forget, I did not receive a meeting notice for the session following this one ever. I've only had access to replays. Okay, Michael, that's kind of unusual. Let me just check something for you, because like on Circle, which my computer's been funky here. On Circle, there's something called Live Classroom, and I don't know that everybody's aware of that. I don't even really know how to access this here. Members, what do we see? Live Classroom. Is there some way that I can access this? Comments. Let me just ask you, Michael, are you aware of being a member of the Live Classroom on Circle? I don't even really know how that works. Tony just tells me type in Live Classroom to the invites for everybody. And okay, so let me just double check something here. I think there's a way, because I will remember to invite you so that you. I'm assuming that for this particular class you just had your eye out for it. Is that what happened? Yeah. We will get to the bottom of this somehow. Andy's Wednesday class. Knew it. I can't quite access that right now. I'll have a look for you, Michael, right? You know what time it is now, and I'll see if I can get you added onto it when I'm scheduling my next meeting. I'll just make a note for that for next week, and if not, I'll speak to Tony, and I'm sure he will let me know so that you don't miss any of the meeting notices. Okay, so the last scale today was the fifth position, fifth pattern of the C major scale. We will start root to root on the C note, the fifth string, the third fret. Same idea, play the first note, always the root note, starting the root note. Ba, 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 da, da, da. The more you do it, the better you get. There's a really obvious statement which can't be overemphasized enough, because if it's something that you're aware of, that you feel it might be important, but again, because we don't want the neighbour to hear us, the cat to hear us, you know, our own ears to hear us, it can feel quite cringy to do this initially, but I want to encourage you to push through that. It gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'm making noises, great, fantastic, but it's helped me to connect with my fretboard, and then you can drop them. You know, I don't have to do that in order to play, and I'll still play the same way. But when I'm playing now, it feels like I'm singing. So there we go. Two note statements, following chords. It's the same ideas we've been looking at, we're just coming at different angles. We're trying to remember that there's nothing that we can do with 20 that we can't do with 2. It largely is a matter of attitude. You have to bring something to the guitar, and you can always bring more than you brought yesterday. You can always do that. So try to avoid getting stagnant and, you know, always feeling like, you know, I'm picking up the guitar and I'm just picking up where I left off. Like, try and get way down the road, see if you can jump to a new level. And sometimes it's just a matter of being a little bit silly about it. You know, here's a great idea that will work for everybody. Like, why not, if you always sit down with the guitar, strap that guitar on and just stand up and go for a walk around your house playing. Why don't you strike a rock pose? It's fun, right? Stand in front of the mirror if you want, with the guitar held up high, and like bend the note and pretend you're Eddie Van Halen or a guitar player of your choosing. And it really does help. It helps you to get into this more free, childish even, curious, fun space with it, versus this very studious, academic, you know, I'll get there and I'm willing to persist. Because that's important for practice, totally useless for playing. You know, you can only play with what you've got, but you can always practice for more. But in any given moment, you can only do that. And I would also leave this last little thought that I'm sure you guys will have encountered if you've played live. You can have all the best plans in the world about all the things you're going to remember to play on the gig, and when you're on that stage and everybody's looking at you, your mind goes blank. And so when the mind goes blank, what's left? And you can prepare for that by doing lots of mindless playing, just having fun, nodding your head, turn the guitar a little louder than you normally would. Like, that could be a cool thing as well, if your guitar's always quite quiet so that nobody else hears it. Like, even wait till people are out the house and just turn it up loud, stand up and just play one big note and imagine that you're standing in a stadium, and just how does it feel? You know, because again, this is all about us opening up to more, and we won't get any more if we just stay within the limitation or the confines of what we're used to. So shake it up. And for those of you who don't already have a long mop on their head, get a wig on if you want as well. Slide on your knees. It's only rock and roll, but we like it, right? So, I'm going to have to jump off now. I've got another group in 5 minutes where I will see some of you all. And failing that, thank you for joining me for another Wednesday class. I look forward to seeing you again. Michael, I see the only Andy is the Andy's Wednesday class. I don't see the 10-week thing. Is this for the for the session following this? Michael, it would help if I could read. So there is no notification for that. I don't know how to set that up. So it's just a case of following the link that I sent you for the first session. If you don't have that, it's always the same link. What I'll do is I will send it to you right now. So let me just grab a hold of that. I do apologise, I've misunderstood the assignment there. So I'll just deal with this right now. I'm assuming Mike is it Mike Bernard, what is she? Mike.Bernard@hey.com. Okay, you've got the link already? It's just the very first one that I ever sent. I sent you a couple of days ago there, so maybe you could have a look. Derek. Okay, I certainly will, Derek. Manuel, you're very welcome, Manuel. Got it, thanks. Yes, I will find it. I will send it to you right now. Mate, I'm just going to I've got an email there just to make sure that you have it. Now, let me see if I can get this up for you. Okay. Copy link address. Okay, so practice like a pro link. Okay, yes, Mike, I've emailed it to you now to the mike.bernard@hey.com. You should have it, my friend. I will see you in a couple of minutes. And Derek, I will endeavour to answer your course question right now. Thank you all, and see some of you shortly.